Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, Jan, thank you very much for the invitation. I suspect Jan invited me so that I can leak some information about the team who is going to play tonight, but I won't. I will talk about the French Cleantech ecosystem. So, as every country in Europe, the ecosystem is special, and I think in Cleantech it's particularly special for different reasons I'm going to explain. One of them actually is the fact that this is probably the only country in Europe when you have a combination of very vivid venture capital market. Actually, it's been more or less the second country over the last 15 years in Europe. And at the same time, a country where corporates are very important. So actually, when you take the combination of both, which is required in Cleantech, it explains maybe why in France we have such a vivid ecosystem and still active compared to other countries who are moving a bit away of what we do. So actually, what we did it was back in 2009. Actually, we decided to work, all the Cleantech investors, we decided to gather in an association called Club Cleantech AFIC. So AFIC is a French venture capital association, and in 2009 we decided to create, to work together. First reason is that actually we didn't have any statistic about the industry. So all the data coming about the French Cleantech market was coming from the US, and it was completely wrong. Okay, so we decided to do it ourselves. And the second reason, you probably know that in venture capital, actually, it's all based about information and information sharing. Okay, and actually, the people involved in Cleantech actually were not working together. They didn't know each other. It was surprising to meet the people doing the same job as me in Paris. Actually, I had to go to San Francisco. I had to go to London. I had to go to Copenhagen. So actually in 2009, during the COP, at that time it was a 15 event, we decided to gather and to create that club. And this is why we get very accurate statistics about our market. So if you look in terms of volume, we have more or less around 500 million euros invested every year in Cleantech startups. It's roughly around 80 companies, so it's more or less stable. We see a growth over years. I will detail why later. If you look at in the spread of sectors, actually it's pretty well diversified, so it follows the trend of the market. Actually, it's very similar to what's happened in Europe and in the US. If you look back at the statistics like 10 years ago, it would be like probably 80% renewable energy and probably 60% solar. Okay, and over time, starting in 2010, we started to see a sector diversification with energy efficiency, with englobe a lot of subsectors, actually being the largest one. Transportation as well. So we have our small Uber or the equivalent in France companies like BlaBlaCar or Drivey or WeCar who are leading some of segments of the transportation sectors. In terms of stage, so this is in number of companies. In amount invested, it's slightly different, but it's mainly mid-stage. We have a lot of seed investments, and the reason why, because we get an investment program subsidized by our sovereign national fund for seed funds. So actually, there are probably 20 seed funds created every year, and probably 2 or 3 of them are related to Cleantech. So you probably know some of my fellow investors in France, companies like Demeter or like Emertech. Basically now they invest mainly through those seed funds. So this is why you get a surprisingly high number of companies financed at the seed stage. And late stage, it's appearing. So obviously late stage, since Cleantech is not as mature as biotech or information technology, obviously the part of late stage company is not that big, but it's improving and it's increasing. So you see renewable, it's more or less stable. The growth is coming from energy efficiency and transportation. I mentioned the reason, so probably the most famous company is BlaBlaCar. Another one is Drivey, who I think it was announced 2 weeks ago, raised 36 million euros. There is WICAR as well, that was part of our portfolio that we sold to SNCF, the French railway. That was a pretty big hit in the market. Air water, that is not picking up as everywhere in Europe, and we had a bit of recycling. So I think it was in 2012 we had a big transaction at around 150 million euro. It was a paper recycling company. Okay, a few comments from the inside. So solar, main event of the last 1-2 years is probably the exit of Solar Direct, which was a startup bought by Engie. I think it was 200 million euros. I think the investor made a 5x. So I think you start talking about a real number and money creation. In the wind sector, actually France is trying to distinguish itself in the offshore segment. So currently there are a lot of tenders happening in that segment, and a willingness to develop new technologies, particularly for floating offshore. So actually in Europe, if you're interested in floating offshore, you will look at probably Scotland on one side and France on the other side. Storage, obviously, it raised the interest of all the energy players. You probably saw the recent transaction, Saft, which is an energy storage company, was bought out by Total for 1 billion euro. Probably the best performing company in our portfolio for Seapower. Same thing. They are more on the transportation side of the storage, but they are ramping up very fast. There are subsidies, there are call for tenders organized by the public or by the government. So you get subsidies to develop this market. Nevertheless, it's not as attractive as the other market. I was reading a study this morning in the train that 80% of the market is going to be between the US, Germany, Japan, and probably China. So France is far behind, and we do off-grid in Africa. Actually, France had a huge presence in Western Africa. So actually, we are deploying now technologies to electrify Africa through this historical network. Transportation, I already mentioned BlaBlaCar. We have actually a lot of initiatives at the car level, electric cars. So it's picking up as in many countries in Europe. Nothing compared to Norway, but it's improving. The nice thing is probably the Bolloré, the blue solution, the Autolib. So now I don't know if you went to Paris recently. Actually, you can rent a pay-as-you-go electric car everywhere in the city and park it everywhere in the city. It's very cheap. So basically, you will pick up a car on one side of the city, cross the entire city. It will cost you 5 euros. And you just book it with your smartphone, and you have a card. You just need to swap. It's very convenient. Okay, and so last sector, so energy efficiency, it's picking up. The smart metering is starting now. So EDF, through its subsidiary ERDF, just deployed Linky, which is the name of the smart meter in France, and it will open a lot of applications. Just what do you do with this data, actually? So this is a topic of interest in France. This is the right timing for this kind of technologies. Obviously, a lot of things around building and around Internet of Things, particularly at the hardware level. It happened that probably two of the leading companies in more on the telecommunication side on a global basis are Actility and Sigfox, both French companies. Do you know them? Have you heard about them? So actually, they are both in our portfolio, and we see they are ramping up very fast. So I was mentioning this specificity of the French market. So we have all those corporates who are involved in partnering with startups at different stage of maturity, with different models. So some will invest directly, some won't invest, they will do only open innovation. Some of them will be active through funds. You get all the models represented. And the last thing is our Club Cleantech AFIC that we created in 2009. So basically, the 50 investors interested in cleantech in France, we gather 4 to 6 times a year. And actually, if you're interested, you can go through Yann just if you want to visit us. The problem is that most of the events are in French, unfortunately, except the first one we do, the one we do early February, most of it is in English. And actually, this is the most important. Around mid-February, we have this event. If you want to know everybody in France in the cleantech scene, basically we gather all the community for you. So visit us. It's very easy to do. And I think that's more or less about it. You know everything about the French cleantech market.
I want to ask you about this company, Sigfox. You are invested, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit why they are raising so much money and why they are really cool and how much traction they really have? Because it's an incredible company that is competing with existing wireless network operators, I believe, in a way.
Yeah, exactly. So actually that's very interesting because at some point we had Actility. So just a small story. I have 2 minutes. Actually, we invested in Sigfox and Actility almost at the same time. At that time, those two companies were not competing. So Sigfox was already with this current business model. So to deploy a telecommunication network, so to become a service provider to end customers, similar to Vodafone, to Orange, to AT&T and those people. So to compete directly with the telecommunication operator. Activity they started, so even though the entrepreneur was a serial entrepreneur coming from the telecommunication industry, actually was focusing on the response demand market in the energy sector. So companies were not competing at all. And one day, the CEO of Actility comes back to us and says, actually, I will change my market. This one is taking off, but it's not that great, not big enough for me. So I will go for the Internet of Things, and basically I will develop a technology competing with Sigfox. So we had to put some Chinese wall because obviously the entrepreneurs didn't want just the information of one shared with the other, even though we never do that. And since then it's been solved a bit because actually Actility choose a different business model. So actually they don't provide the service, they will sell the equipment, the hardware to the telecommunication operators. So they're selling to Vodafone, they're selling to Orange, I think, and they are selling to KPN and many telecommunication operators. And so they have different models. So Sigfox is making a bit less money right now, but they are spreading the network, and this is why they are raising so much money, because they need to be everywhere very fast. And it doesn't cost that much. For a country like France, you can deploy your network in the country like with 10 million euros. So it's a fraction of what it costs just to deploy a 4G, for example, network in a country. So this is very cheap, but they need to be everywhere very fast. So this is why they are raising so much money.
It's really about being the leader in a global competition, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you do it the American way, build a global leader.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. And what do you think about the idea of bringing Ecosummit to Paris?
I think this is a great idea.
Are you going to help us?
As always.
Okay, cool. We have a deal. Yeah.